Welcome to another edition of Altitude Advantage. I am your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. Across the table, we have our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla, and our digital media contributor, Susanna Ware. It is Dub Day, you guys. It's exciting to celebrate. The Broncos got a big win on Sunday against the Indianapolis Colts, clinching their first winning season since 2016. 24 hours later, what are your initial thoughts? How do you feel about this game? It was a tough game. It wasn't pretty, but the Broncos were able to get it done at home.
Yeah, I think one of my big takeaways is that there's no party for 9 wins, right? There's no cupcakes. Sean Payton joked after the game that he was going to have cupcakes for the media because the media kept asking all week. They made it a storyline. I mean, we've got to talk about it is a significant milestone to get to when you haven't been there since 2016. But Sean Payton's got his guys looking ahead. And
Bigger goals.
This was one of those wins where it almost felt like, I think it was the Raiders game maybe, or the Panthers game, where Sean Payton, the Broncos win the game, but you can tell he's not pleased with how they won the game, right? And I think it was after the Panthers that he said, hey, we're going to play better teams in this. We're going to have to play better to beat better teams in this. And that's what this felt like. I think the Broncos have shown now that they are a good enough team that they cannot play their best game and they can still win the football game. You saw it this week. You saw it against the Raiders. I think you saw it defensively against the Browns. Certainly that Panthers game was a little rough early, and then late Panthers closed the gap a little bit. And so that's encouraging that this team that, again, I think it's important to put all this in the frame of reference of coming into the season, how the national expectations were for this group, which were people were ranking this skill group the worst in the NFL. They were talking about the Broncos potentially having the first overall pick, Bo Nix, being a reach at number 12. Like, these are all things that were being said externally.
Look at you keeping receipts.
Well, it just, like, I think now that we're at 9 wins, people are talking about, okay, well, hey, is the run game good enough, or is the defense like showing a little bit of, early in games, are they struggling a bit? But let's put all this in context of where we were before the season. And so that said, the fact that you're not only beating some of the teams you play, but the Broncos are now, but they haven't lost a game, right, against teams that are 500 or below. And so they are taking care of business in the games that they should, and they need to. And for a long time around here, the issue has been not just that, maybe occasionally you knock off one of those top teams, but the issue has been that you then lose a game that you shouldn't lose. Or in these toss-up games, you're coming out, you're winning 30% of them instead of 60% of them. And the Broncos have shown that even when they're not at their best, they are in a different class than a whole bunch of teams in the NFL, and they have earned where they are in the playoff race. They're 9-5. This is not a fluke. This is not a team that's gotten lucky. They've got a bunch of 2-score wins, right? Only one of their wins has been by one score, and that was the Jets game in that monsoon that was going on. So all that said is this was not the best performance. They still found a way to win, but they know they've got to be better because if it weren't for Jonathan Taylor making just an egregious mistake at the goal line, this could have turned out very differently. We could have been having a very different conversation this morning. So the Broncos were fortunate from that degree, but they took over when they needed to. They made big plays, which we've seen them do time and time again, and now they are so close to the postseason for the first time since 2015.
Yeah, I talked to a lot of the guys, and they all thank the football gods for that Jonathan Taylor mishap, because just something that you're not used to seeing from him, and it was a huge turning point in the game, and a lot of guys said it was the momentum shift that they didn't even realize was happening. I talked to Nik Bonitto after the game about that specific play, and he mentioned, I was actually really mad that the touchdown had even happened, so I didn't even realize what was going on. Then I hear the crowd cheering. I look up and I see the replay, and it's just like, oh my God, this is a huge moment. And they all were able to kind of lock back in. And after that, literally the Colts didn't score any points after that.
Yeah, it was season changing for Indianapolis and for the Broncos. If they score and they go up 13 points, Bo obviously, and we'll talk about Bo in a second, he didn't have his best day, especially early in the game. And the offense, after that somewhat early touchdown drive midway through the first, they struggled. I think they had 3 or 4 first downs for 7 consecutive drives, I think. It was a slog to some degree. And if you're down 13 points and now you've got to start pushing the ball, the defense has to be a little more aggressive and take some chances. PJ Locke talked about it after the game. It's just an entirely different football game, and who knows if the Broncos are able to get back into it. And, you know, you don't often like to say a season can change on one play. I think that that's dramatic to some degree, but this was that moment where, like, the Broncos, they've got an uphill climb to win that game, and if they lose, now they're facing a 40-something% chance of making the playoffs, and all the excitement. And, I mean, that place was rocking late in the fourth quarter. People were feeling it. They were having fun. That's all gone, maybe, if Jonathan Taylor doesn't drop that ball.
Yeah.
And I know 31-13 looks like Broncos ran away with it, and they did pour it on in the fourth quarter, and I do think they were the better team, and that if those teams played 10 times, the Broncos probably win 8 or 9 of them. Like, they are a better team than the Colts, but the things that could not happen in that game, which Sean Payton mentioned afterwards, like this whole list of things of what we need to do, we're doing the opposite of every single one of them. We're turning the ball over.
Yeah.
We're not stopping the run. We're not winning the punt return game. And he probably could have gone on there, but still, despite all that, they found a way to force 5 takeaways, or maybe they forced 4. They ended up with 5. Jonathan Taylor, maybe he gets credit with a forced fumble there on himself. That could be like a little bit of a silver lining there.
Well, Suze, what are your initial thoughts after the game, or even on the Jonathan Taylor play, and kind of what you heard from the locker room?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it last week, and a lot of guys talked about it in the locker room, that, you know, good teams find different ways to win, and especially when you're not having your best day, and we've seen that the past couple games. But, I mean, I think the attitude still in the locker room is, like, they're not satisfied. They know it's not their best, and so it's been encouraging to see that, like, you know, they take the win for what it is, but they're looking ahead to, like, we got to be better than this down the stretch. So
it's a tough couple games coming up as they close out the season. They have the Chargers, they have the Bengals, and then they have the Chiefs to close out the season. But one of the really big bright spots has been Nik Bonitto. I mean, a lot of the guys are really singing his praises in the locker room. JFM mentioned that when they asked him what kind of year is Nik having, and he's like, the kind of year I want to have. And he joked about it, and he smiled, because they are really aware of what Nik has been able to really do this season. And when you kind of look at his body of work, he had a pick 6 on Monday Night Football, a huge turning point in that game. He had another, defensive touchdown this game, which was ruled a fumble recovery, which he thought was funny, because he's like, I thought it was a pick 6, and this one was a fumble recovery. He's like, but I'll take it, whatever gets me into the end zone. What have you seen from Nik and just his development?
Yeah, well, he's apparently just as good of a corner or safety as he is an outside linebacker, because he's making all sorts of plays.
Yeah, he said he's a big basketball star, too. That's why he's able to kind of just jump.
Is that why?
That's what he said. He said, I was a killer in basketball.
he said a menace.
Menace.
I was a menace.
Dun, dun, dun.
There's a great screenshot. Like, if you freeze the play, he's like 4 yards away from the ball, and he's just got his arms outstretched like he's waiting. And then he just,
so the camera can see it.
Then he just plucks it right out of the air. It's a funny screenshot. People should go pause it before he gets there. Adonai Mitchell, the guy who threw the pass, or the lateral, or whatever we're calling it, he was like, the guy was open, and then he wasn't. And he was like, it would have worked if number 15 didn't turn into Ed Reed.
Yeah.
And when someone's comparing you to Ed Reed, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Listen, I hope Nik Bonitto wins Defensive Player of the Year. I'm somewhat skeptical, just because of, it takes a narrative generally to win these awards, and I think Nik Bonitto is still
building
kind of proving himself and still making a name for himself in this league, and voters sometimes get attached to the big name guys out there like a TJ Watt, a Myles Garrett. But listen, Bonitto's got, 11 and a half, 12 sacks now. He's got 2 defensive touchdowns. You put a list of the guys up that have done that sort of thing, and it's like J.J. Watt is on that list. There's not many guys that have done what Nik Bonitto is doing. And I think I talked about this last week, but we came into the season, and the Broncos had some good talent at edge rusher,
right,
but they didn't have a guy yet who had proven that he could be this 10-plus sack guy. And in fact, it had been since 2018, which we've talked about, since the Broncos had a guy with 10 sacks. And then Nik Bonitto says, okay, I'll show you what I can do. Mm-hmm. And in part, it's due to the work he's put in to get better against the run, so he can stay on the field, play more plays, but also just the bend. We talk about it. It is Vaughn-esque, the way he's able to dip and the speed to power. And he's making these game-changing plays. And that's what you need from, like, to some degree, sacks are obviously a positive stat, and pressure's great, but you want your top edge guy to be able to make those game-changing plays. And it's interesting that Bonitto's done them in this way.
Yeah.
You know, like there haven't been a ton of strip sacks, for example, but he did have the one right in Vegas. Mm-hmm. And so he's making those plays. He's a big-time player. And, yeah, you could argue that Surtain and Bonitto are both deserving of Defensive Player of the Year consideration.
Yeah, you look at the way that this team talks about each other, and one of the things that Nik had said, he just said that Vaughn is one of his favorite players, and that's someone that he looks up to. And when I asked him, like, what hasn't working so well with you? Yeah, you're in the end zone 2 consecutive weeks, and he said, I don't know what I'm doing to make me play so well, but I'm just gonna keep doing my job and making sure that I read my plays so that good things happen and everyone can eat around me. And if you look at somebody like will recover, DJ Jones will recover the fumble. Like everyone kind of has a piece of the defense. And when you look at what this defense was able to do, they had 17 points off of turnovers. And that was really crucial in this game, especially like you said, when the Colts were kind of running away. Anthony Richardson was kind of having his way in the first half. And Jonathan Cooper mentioned after the game that during halftime, they were like, all right, we need to take out his run game completely. Because once we do that, everything else will fall into place. And you see P.J. Locke make a play. You see Brandon Jones make a play in the game. And when you watch this defense really gel together, I feel like there's almost no ceiling for what they're capable of doing, especially down the stretch.
Yeah, they gave the offense a ton of chances. And it probably shouldn't have been as close of a game as it was, or as late as it was in the game, right? Because you had Brandon Jones' interception in the first half, and the Broncos probably could have, I think it was 10-7 at that point. They could have put it away at that point. Yeah. Like if you score a touchdown on that drive, and Anthony Richardson's got to start throwing the ball, they got to get away from the run game a little bit. That would have been bad with the way Jonathan Taylor was playing. Like to keep Jonathan Taylor involved. But the defense just kept giving him chances, and the offense eventually figured it out. But I think the key was that they played the game on Indy's side of the field, right? And that was in part due to the defense just getting 3 and outs. Like there was one, it was in the third quarter where they pinned the Colts deep. Richardson threw it to himself. That was either in the second quarter or the third quarter, but he threw it to himself, caught the pass, and then the Broncos get good field position there. They weren't able to, I think, convert there, though there were so many drives in this game. Like it started off the Colts kind of dominating time of possession. The Broncos only had the ball once in the first quarter, and then these two offenses both struggled to get things going. There were turnovers, and it was like back and forth. But because Sean Payton talks about this a lot, when you play the game in the opponent's side of the field, their mistakes are magnified and yours are less important. And so Bo throws a pick in the third quarter, looking for Cortland Sutton down on the right sideline. You know, it's a bummer because Marvin Mims just taking you inside Colts territory to start a drive. But because the mistake is made down there, now the defense can make a play. They get a stop, and all of a sudden you're right back in their side of the field. So not only did the defense prevent the Colts from scoring, they were only in the red zone one time the entire game, but they also, like, the stops were quick. There were a lot of 3 and outs, especially in the second half, and they flipped the narrative, they flipped the script of the game, forced the Colts to kind of be backed up the whole time, which then, you know, granted, it took several chances for the Broncos to do something with it, but Bo Nix and the offense kept taking over at midfield or inside midfield, and eventually the dam broke and they were able to find a way to get in the end zone.
Yeah, Brandon Jones mentioned that on the sideline they were telling everyone was kind of telling turnovers. So we need a turnover. He said they had confidence that that was going to fall into place, and he acknowledged, like, look, like sometimes the defense needs to pick up the offense, and that has been flipped too. Sometimes the offense has had to pick up the defense. This is a team sport. This is why we all support each other. We don't turn on each other, because we understand that not every game is going to go as we planned. And so when we make turnovers and when we try to make a play on the ball, it slows down the game for the defense. Suze, when you look at the way that this team has played, or just talking to the guys in the locker room, that defensive mindset is something that kind of spreads across all the guys.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, after every single game, like, you know, you ask them, well, how are you hanging in the game when things are not going to plan? And a lot of them are like, listen, we never had any waver in our faith that we were going to make a play in a big moment. Like, it really genuinely seems like they never have any doubts that, like, when those critical moments in the game present themselves, they're going to find a way to get it done. So, you know, and I've seen that extend, like you were mentioning. I mean, Brandon Jones spoke to kind of how they're picking each other up when they need to. And I think that just goes back to the whole mindset of this team throughout the season. So, but I've been very impressed by just the resiliency of so many of these players that when things are not going well, like we saw yesterday early in the game, they could have given up or shown some waiver there, but you didn't see any of that at all.
Yeah. That has come a long way from game one of the season when we were talking about what's the identity of this team? Are they gritty? Are they resilient? How are they able to handle adversity? And the way that they've been responding, especially coming off of bye week, the Colts were also coming off of a bye week, essentially fighting for their season. So it was a tough game going into this. And when you look at the way that Nik played, Cooper had a couple big plays, and you really see the progress of Vance Joseph's defense. And every time I talk to any of the guys about how VJ has helped them, they're just he lets us play free. He lets us play in a way that we're confident in ourselves and we know plays can be made. And I think PJ Locke spoke to that too, because he was saying man, I've been waiting to make a play like that. And I've been waiting, and I finally got one, and it felt so good to really kind of contribute and make a big play and a pivotal point in the game.
Yeah, the takeaways and the returns, without those, the Broncos probably don't win this game, because the offense, like we said, they struggled to put drives together. Susie, you got to tell me when I'm wrong here, because I was just wrong before. The Richardson, it led directly to a touchdown. You can just yell when I'm saying things that are not true.
She internalizes the joy.
She's very happy over there. But eventually the offense did figure it out, right? And I think the impressive thing, so with QBR, right, is the ESPN stat that they do. Mm-hmm. They had Richardson with a higher QBR than Bo yesterday. I don't know how you watch that football game and think that Anthony Richardson played better than Bo Nix.
Yeah.
And that's not, it kind of sounds like a shot. Richardson completed fewer than 50% of his passes.
Right.
He was sacked several times, had the fumble, right? He had 2 picks. Mm-hmm. I know Bo threw 3 interceptions, but he then responded with 3 touchdown passes. And
okay, speak on it, Aric.
Well, I just Bo's passer rating was higher, which normally passer rating feels like a stat that isn't as accurate. But in this case, I don't know. That's just a question for the QBR people out there. I wonder what goes into that, where Anthony Richardson's game is considered better than Bo's.
Right.
Because there were some passes there, especially late in the game, as Richardson had to start throwing the ball a lot more. Passes were going over guys' heads. They were at their feet. They just were not accurate in a way that gave guys a chance. And speaking about Bo, he said, sitting on the sideline, you do question, where are we from a passing standpoint? He said you wonder, is every pass I throw going to be an interception at this point? But then there's that strength, and granted, it took Marvin Mims returning the ball all the way to the 15-yard line, but then he makes a play, finds Nate Adkins, who spins into the end zone. He finds Cortland Sutton later in the game, and he kind of got up off the mat and showed something really impressive, because a lot of the games that he's played well in from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And it's one thing to throw 1 interception and then get it going or whatever, but to throw 3 picks for the first time in your NFL career, and he said...
And it's week 15.
Yeah.
Let's also highlight that part.
And he said, listen, it probably won't be the last time that I do this. He said, hopefully it will be, but it probably won't be the last time. It happens to everybody. Mahomes does it. Josh Allen does it. It's going to happen. But the fact that he was able to respond in spite of that, and the Broncos were still able to win, and it didn't end up being close, that says a lot about Bo, I think, and you continue to learn different things about Bo throughout the year in terms of how can he be your franchise guy, whether it's with his legs or carving up a team like the Falcons and completing more than 80% of his passes, or not having a great day against the Jets, but he makes 2 really big-time throws to Cortland Sutton to win the football game. And you put all of those different things together, or it's against the Raiders. They're not playing great in the first half, but he puts it together, makes some big-time plays, and they win the game. But this, to me, was another box checked of when you really don't have it, or you start to go in a negative direction and you've got these turnovers. Is that it for you that day? Are you just going to continue to play at that level, or can you flip the switch and turn it around? And the fact that he did that, I thought was really encouraging. His teammates in the locker room McGlinchey was like, we don't need to say anything to him. He gets it. He's mature. Sean Payton said he's got this moxie about him, this maturity about him that Sean loves. And he said the guys in the locker room, that it's contagious for them and that they feed off that. And that if you have a quarterback that even if he's not playing well or even if he makes a mistake, he's going to come right back at you. I don't want to make like a comparison for Bo as in terms of who he is as a player, but you think of the greats in the game, right? Like a Mahomes, a Brady, Manning, like those guys kind of in the last however long, like they're never out of it. Even if they throw a pick, even if you've got them down, it's like
even if there's like 40 seconds left on the clock, you're just like,
when you play the Chiefs,
back.
it's like, is Mahomes, even last year in Denver when the Broncos finally beat them, they're down 10 points with like 3 minutes left, and I'm still like, is it actually done, or is Mahomes going to do something insane, even though they turned the ball over 5 times that day?
Yeah.
And I think, as Sean said, when you have a quarterback like that even when you're down or he's not at his best, he can still find a way to get up off the mat and do something, that's inspiring to a locker room. And when you don't have that and you have a quarterback that, hey, if he makes a couple mistakes or he's not having his best day, we're out of it, that's really bad for a team. And so the fact that I think that felt like a game yesterday where if you go into the playoffs and you fall behind early, I think you can look back at that game yesterday and say, like, Bo's got us. And that doesn't mean you're going to, march to the Super Bowl and win. There's a lot of really good teams you're going to face if you make it to the postseason. But I don't think that there's this. It just feels like they took a step in terms of like knowing we can come back from some things that maybe in the past they couldn't have.
Well, Suze, I feel like Bo has always talked about liking a hostile environment and liking like these big moments and not shying away from them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I've just been impressed by how like even keeled he is always. And even like yesterday, hearing him talk after the game, he's like, yeah, it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't my best day. That probably won't be the last time I do that, but like it happens. And I mean, I love how like there's still just like the ultimate trust and faith in him from everybody in the locker room. And it seems like from the coaching staff, like, yeah, he wasn't having his best day, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop putting him out there and giving him more opportunities.
Yeah, that trust runs deep. And Cortland Sutton is one of those voices in the locker room that even when he spoke to the media, and he just had his quarterback's back, like, completely. And that's one thing you want to see, of course, but it's genuine. And I think you definitely see through it. It's not just like, oh, he's doing it because it's his quarterback. He's doing it because he truly believes in Bo. And they also trust, like, this is also the same guy that won NFL Rookie of the Week 3 weeks in a row. And we also have to adjust, like, he is a rookie and he is going to have these growing pains. And you are going against teams that are, again, like the Colts are fighting for their season. Their defense has been successful in getting turnovers and things like that. So it's not like this is just like a fluke or something like that. And I really appreciated Cortland saying that. And looking at the special teams, Marvin Mims was just such a spark for this team yesterday. And when they asked Cortland Sutton in the locker room, like, what's your reaction when Marvin Mims does a play like that? And he smiled all big and he's all this. He's all, geez, like, this is my reaction. And I liked what he said because he said, like, if you just look at the stat sheet, you're not going to see Marvin Mims plays or how big of an impact they had in the game. But if you're locked into this, you see how crucial he is, especially when the run game just wasn't going the way that they wanted it to go. Yeah,
Sean Payton said Monday, like, we've got to get the run game figured out a little bit. And he talked about it from a blocking standpoint, in terms of seeing where those holes are. There's a whole bunch of things that have to go right, but he did mention that's an area you've got to be better in. But again, the same way that the defense's turnovers kept the Broncos in this game, so did Marvin Mims. I mean, there were 3 different returns of 25 yards about. Suze, if I'm wrong, check me. I think that's right. Because he had the 9-yarder that was, and they got the 15-yard penalty tacked on. There was another one into Colts territory, and then of course the 61-yarder. That's a huge deal. And Cortland talked about. Obviously, everyone's going to talk about the 61-yarder. We wrote a story about it. Like you're posting the highlight of it, but
that's
the other
on DenverBroncos.com.
It is. Click. But the other 2 are just as important because they flip the field. And if he calls a fair catch at the 20 and you don't get a first down and you punt it away, okay, now maybe they're taking over at the 30, and if they can get a couple first downs, now you're backed up. And then if you punt it away, they're at midfield, and all of a sudden they're able to add a field goal, and it just becomes a different game. And sometimes it's like this game within a game of almost like a chess match to some degree of, can we punt it down? Like we're where the Broncos scored their first touchdown was, can we punt it down there, get a stop, get them to send it back to us, we get a decent return. Now all of a sudden, instead of having to go 80 yards, we've got to go 50 yards, or to get into field goal range, we've got to go 20 yards. And that is a big deal. Marvin's had some games where he's been really involved in offense. This wasn't necessarily one of those nights where he had a bunch of contributions offensively, but he found a way to get it done on special teams. And it looks like this is a guy that he never complained in the media or anything, but like last year when he was a rookie, he said, I've just got to wait for my opportunities. And he came into this year and everybody talked about it's going to be Marvin Mims' breakout year. And Sean Payton talked about, we held him back a little bit as a coaching staff. And especially early in the year, it didn't really progress that way where you weren't seeing these huge games from Marvin, especially on offense. And I think it would have been easy for him to just kind of shut it down or be like, this isn't the spot for me, or like, I'm not getting the reps I want. And instead, he embraced this role of, okay, well, how can I be helpful? And, is it in the return game where obviously he was an all-pro last year, Pro Bowler? Is it lining up in the backfield and doing some of these kind of weird formations? And he's just embraced that. And then whether it's been in the return game or on offense, the last several weeks you've seen him become probably closer to this Joker player that Sean talks about. And it just looks like he's having fun out there. Like he's hanging out in the locker room before talking to the media, and he's just smiling and laughing. Like, obviously winning's fun, but so it is too when, like, you've got a big hand in that. And we'll probably forget in a few weeks. Like, we'll think about, the 5 turnovers that the Broncos forced. Think about, Bo getting back on it in the fourth quarter. I think his passer rating was like 120 in the fourth quarter through 2 touchdowns. But Marvin was as big a reason for this win as anybody.
Yeah, I think another thing when Cortland was talking, if you look at the inside the locker room best of sound on DenverBroncos.com, you can literally see Marvin just smiling as Cortland is talking about him and like giving him praise, and you can see Marvin just kind of holding his hat and looking and smiling, and he was next to talk to the media. But again, it's like I feel like every guy has really embraced those roles, especially when key guys have gone down with injury, and you want to look at the way that this team has really been able to step up week after week, especially when certain guys are going down, whether it's in-game or just out due to injury. Currently, it's really important the way that this team kind of builds on top of that resiliency and that next man up mentality, which is going to be key because this is a short week. They're going into a primetime game on Thursday Night Football versus the Los Angeles Chargers, a huge game now that Miami lost to Houston, the Chargers lost to the Bucs, and now the Broncos have an opportunity to clinch the postseason on prime time.
Yeah, and I'll fact check myself here real quick. 4 of 7 for 46 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 116.7 rating for Bo in the fourth quarter. So much better in the fourth quarter. Put it together.
Yeah. It's not how you start; it's how you finish.
That's true.
Bars.
Maybe if you start good, that could be good too, though. I'm open to both. Listen, I think my mindset is shifting about this team, and it should. Over the last 7-8 years, it's been tough, and you get to the end of the season and you think, okay, well, if the Broncos can just like win these 5 games in a row and these other teams lose these 6 games, like maybe they can sneak in. And so this is a different reality for the Broncos.
Feeling, yeah.
And I think it's time to recognize that this team is 9-5. They are not sneaking into the playoffs. This is not like, obviously the Houston win over Miami helps. And yes, you only need one more win over the final 3 games to get into the playoffs. But isn't it about time that we recognize, like, this is a team that's more likely to go win all 3 than to win none of them? Ooh. Like, this is a team that is a legitimately good football team, finds ways to win, generally does not beat itself, has some really good players in Pat Surtain and Nik Bonitto, Zach Allen, a bunch of others on the defensive side of the ball, a wide receiver who's playing at a really high level in Cortland Sutton, an edge on special teams, a young quarterback that even when he makes mistakes finds a way to bounce back, a really good offensive line that is allowing very few sacks. Obviously, you got to get the run game going, but like,
that's almost like the final piece. Like once that gets unlocked.
But like you talk about, and I agree with you, like you look at this schedule of at Chargers, at Bengals, home versus Chiefs. It's like, that is a tough schedule, but shouldn't these teams be looking at, like, if you're Cincinnati looking at the Broncos, shouldn't you be like, dang, we got to face the Broncos? Right? Like, because this is not I think because of the struggles and the fact that the success is all new, we tend to look at it as like, okay, well, can they find a way to win one of these last three? And instead, I think it should just be like, no, they've earned they're not 8-7 or they're not 7-7 or whatever. Like, this is a team that is 4 games above 500, has won 4 games in a row, and if not for a blocked field goal in Kansas City, it has won 5 in a row, including one over the defending champs. And so this is a good football team. And I think, if you're the Chargers, you're coming off a blowout loss to the Bucs. Justin Herbert, by all reports, didn't look quite right from a mobility standpoint. The Broncos have a chance to go there, clinch a playoff berth, push the Chargers out of the way for the 6th seed. And if they keep winning, this is a Broncos team that can get up to the 5 seed. I think if they win this week, the chances of having either the 5 or 6 seed is 80%. And so this is a Broncos team that I think we're getting to the time where it's not just this cute story about a team that won more games than they were supposed to. It's this is a legitimately good football team. And are there good opponents playing, coming up on the schedule? Sure. And I'm excited to see how do the Broncos match up with the Chargers or the Chiefs or even the Bengals with a elite quarterback in Joe Burrow. But I'm also at the point where I'm just this is a good football team, and other teams should be just as worried to play the Broncos.
Yeah, and I think that praise has creeped in the way that this team has responded in prime time slots and the way that this team has responded just in games alone. Because, again, yes, you look back at the Colts game, the Jonathan Taylor play, all those things, but they didn't just let that momentum shift past. That momentum shifted, and they grabbed on, they held on to it for the remainder of the game. And on a short week, they're able to kind of enjoy the win for a little bit, flush that out. It's a short, couple days before you have to fly to LA to play on Thursday Night Football. And I think it's just, to your point, I'm sure the Broncos are excited for this and going to be look, we're going to continue to show what we can do. And I think from the Chargers' perspective, it's did you see what the Broncos defense did? Against this team? Do you see what they did against this team? Do you see the way the Bo Nix responded in this situation? And it's you almost have to find new ways to attack them because they found different ways to win. And that's one thing that Nik mentioned yesterday after the game. He said, that's one of our strengths is finding different ways to win. And that's been really good for us to know that we're not one-dimensional in that way. So, again, a short week before the Broncos head out to Los Angeles for that primetime Thursday Night Football game that they got flexed into. And I remember Sean Payton saying it's better be flexed in than flexed out.
And they wanted this.
They wanted this.
They wanted to go play on a short week against the Chargers. They wanted to push the Bengals out of this and get a long week to get ready for Cincinnati next week. Sean said they're planning as if that game is going to be Saturday. Hasn't been officially announced yet, but they're planning on that. They wanted this moment, and it's a big, we'll talk about it tomorrow or Wednesday whenever we're back, but they wanted this and get a chance to get revenge against a team that came to Denver and beat you. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, they're bring it on.
Yeah.
Suze, any final thoughts?
I'm excited. That's all I got. I'm excited.
This is her excited face, guys. I wish the 3-shot was showing so you could see Suze's excited face. All right, well, that'll do it for this edition of Altitude Advantage. Again, I'm your team reporter and host, Elisa Hernandez. Across the table, we have our chess master, our coach, and our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla, and our digital media contributor, Susanna Ware. Appreciate you guys. Make sure you guys comment. Visit DenverBroncos.com for all the latest, and we will see you next time.